Welcome everyone. This will be our this is an open session for the financial planning working group, and we're going to tackle the different topics that we've been discussing, not only in the strategic planning working group sessions, but also the things that we've been discussing not only in the Discord channel for financial planning, but also in the forums or in the rest of the Discord channels around financial planning, the grants program funds, and everything around the DAO funds. So again, as we always do with the strategic planning sessions, we'll first have a quick introduction with a presentation that Lorelike will present you all. And then, as we always do, we'll invite everyone to join the stage by raising your hands and share your comments, your thoughts, and insights that you would like to share with the rest of the community to continue the discussions this way. So with that said, I'm going to pass it to Lorelike, and he will present.
Hi folks, thank you for joining this session. We prepared a small presentation on financial planning, and my assistant Anna will guide through it. And can you please give a word? Also, I want to tell you that we have a guest, Moss from Avantgarde and Coltron from Carpet Key. They're experts in digital assets management, and they also will have a word to say. Okay, so let's start.
Hi everyone. Do you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So let's start then. So as we mentioned before, we prepared a presentation on financial planning. And to begin with, we want to talk about community concerns. So the first one is DAO expenses consistently and significantly surpass its income. The second one is constant mana sell pressure by DAO and foundation. The third one is DAO lacks diverse and stable revenue streams to offset its expenses. The first one is current expenses inside the grants program appear inflated, necessitating clearer guidelines and greater accountability. Next one is need for clearer financial reporting. Then we have concerns about DAO's long-term financial sustainability. And the last one is Treasury's asset concentration in mana, suggestions for diversification. So here you can see recent community initiatives. The first one which we have in here is deposit up to 50% of DAO's Ethereum into Manas LPs. And the second one is convert up to 50% of DAO's Ethereum into permissionless staked nodes. Then we have some thoughts on the next steps. The first one is DAO's financial analytics. Then we have attract professional in this field. Then we have address the over-reliance on mana, transition to a more diverse field portfolio, including stable coins, and implement new ways of income sources such as yield farming and liquidity provision. The third one is optimize current expenses, set clear guidelines for future outflows. The next one is forecast on DAO's short and long-term financial plans. The fifth one is develop user-friendly financial dashboards and reports, ensuring that the community has a clear view on the DAO's financial health. Then we have established a decision-making framework for the grants program for more effective and transparent community decisions. Then we have established a sustainability fund, and the last one is establish a DAO treasury committee squad. Then for decision-making framework for grants to raise the quality and accountability of grants program, So this framework could involve a specialized squad or committee that posts non-binding recommendations or opinions in the grant comments section. These recommendations would be based on a comprehensive set of evaluation criteria designed to ensure that each grant proposal aligns with the DAO's strategic objectives and meets other relevant benchmarks for DAO standards. And here you can see what we have. Then we have Sustainability Fund for Decentraland DAO. Sustainability Fund can insulate the Decentraland DAO for economic fluctuation, ensuring it can maintain both its long-term and short-term operations and plans, irrespective of wider economic conditions. And the fund could be sourced from a combination of mana vesting contract, then treasury, and ongoing income streams. And the money in this fund could be reserved exclusively for DAO core operations, development, investments, and to generate new revenue streams such as staking or liquidity provision, or bolster existing ones. This all for now. Thank you.
Thank you. As I said, we have a guest from Carpe Young Vanguard, and they also have something to say, presentation. Ruka or Moss, you can raise hands and we will invite you. Thank you.
Hey guys, how's it going?
All is good. How about you?
Good. Let me just for some context here, we Lord Like reached out a couple of weeks ago to both Avant-Garde and Karpatki. We've been in touch since that time, and assessing the status quo of the DAO business model, and going through the financials. And it became apparent to us that there's an opportunity to sort of professionalize all of things finance related. So initially, the request was for us to think ways in which we'd be able to create this treasury management committee or of some sorts. But then, given the initial assessment that we've made, it became apparent to us that this whole thing the scope would have to be much more large than treasury management. We actually think that the gist or the initial necessity of the DAO is first and foremost to really make a checkpoint on the financials, going through a thorough accounting process, and the one that really is going to establish sort of the grounds for us to work on budgeting, being able to sort of have more control on the expenses, but also start devising ways in which we should be able to diversify revenue streams, and preferably ones that are not directly correlated with mana for obvious reasons. So we've started working on a brief document that I like to share with you guys. Just a second. Okay. Oh, open system preferences. Wow. Just a second. I'm to have to keep permissions to Discord later. Let me see if I'm able to do so right now. And please let me know if you can see my screen right now.
Yeah, all good.
Okay, cool. Okay, this is sort of a draft proposal, and it basically lays out the fundamentals of creating a finance working group. As I've mentioned before, finance working group would be responsible for the ongoing development of basically three main topics. And first and foremost, the accounting one, which I've described, then the budgeting, and the third one would be treasury management. And the main objective for the treasury management, not necessarily on the yield generation, but mostly on capital preservation. And all of that would be sitting on top of Enzyme's execution infrastructure, connected to the off-chain risk management infrastructure of Karpatki, as I've mentioned before, focused on making sure that we don't lose funds. And the way we're planning to do this is use our existing infrastructure, the one that really is serving $300 million plus dollars in assets under management, to account for risks around protocol hacks, deep hacks, whatever. So I'll let Moss go deeper on to the details of the Enzyme execution.
Yeah, very good. So yeah, the idea is to use Enzyme as a core infrastructure for treasury management. This allows, I would say, the best of both worlds, because it allows to the DAO to keep control over a vault that it owns, and it can be actually like the setting, the configuration of the vault can be determined by DAO votes, decisions at DAO level, and then once the vault is created, it can be configured in a way that gives a trustless delegation to a number of parties like Karpatki, Avantgarde, and also members of the Decentraland DAO community. So then, the execution can happen within the Enzyme vault, which also gives, I think one of the points that were raised was like the transparency and having, the dashboard that gives visibility to the whole community. So this would be built in on Enzyme, which has 7 subgraphs that give 24/7 NAV reporting, historical track record, list of all transactions. So those things will be basically already baked in our infrastructure, and would allow both the DAO to keep control and custody on the underlying assets, but also like professional service providers like us, and Karpatki to be able to render these type of services. I think it's important to mention that also that the working group would be composed of members of Karpatki, members from our organization, but also members from the community itself, because we think it's the involvement of the community is of key members of the community is important. And there's also actually one of the elements of the scope, and I'll leave it more like to Ruka to mention this on the budgeting, which is definitely the contribution of the DAO is definitely crucial in that sense.
All right. And speaking of the FWG's composition, we've assessed the scope of work and the needs for this working group, and really acknowledged that there's the need for 5 full-time equivalents, meaning 5 people that will be comprised of both people or 2 representatives from the Decentraland community, then 2 representatives from Karpatki, and 1 from Avantgarde. I'll let you later go in depth into the document and their roles, but it's mostly trying to replicate one organizational strategy that has proved successful along the 3 years that Karpatki has been working with DAOs. It really capitalizes on both having the in-depth knowledge on the community and the experience, and also tapping in, Avantgarde's and Karpatki's experience managing other DAOs and focusing on the financial aspects of the day-to-day operations. Later on, so the DAO nominees will definitely have to be later on decided depending on the community opinions, but we do have some or will make some suggestions on the elements of and representatives of the DAO that we think would be suited for this role. With regards to compensation, we don't have. We're waiting for the community's feedback on the agreement of the scope of this working group. But the way we foresee this, and even though we typically would charge fee structure along the lines of a hedge fund because of mostly being focused on treasury management. We think that this proposal and the scope goes way beyond that, and because of that, we're planning to charge a fixed monthly fee, one that is projected to be executed 100% in mana, but later on, with the intent and of aligning both the engagement and the service providers' intents of diversifying into non-correlated assets such as Ether, and we could, target specific diversifications of treasury upon which we'd be start charging something along the lines of 80% ETH mine or something like that. So that is, to later be decided on. What's one thing that we can guarantee is that we're going to benchmark previous engagements from service providers and grants to make sure that this proposal goes in line with what the DAO is normally used to pay for. We acknowledge the dire straits position that the finances of the DAO are in this moment, so we can accommodate and really focus on establishing this long-term relationship. Any questions? Any questions on the presentation? I'll share the link on the chat for your assessment. It's an open one. Feel free to reach out even on later on Discord or how you see fit. It will be available to answer questions. But if anyone of you wants to step forward, feel free.
Thank you for this presentation. Yeah, we have some questions from fans in chat. Can you please?
Okay, let me just
handle
stop sharing my screen. Okay, Luca. When you say working group, you mean the formation of a new committee or squad? I think we're discussing things that we first need to define as a community before hiring anyone. 100%. That's actually the reason why we're even here. This is just the first discussion around the potential or the formation on a working group. And yes, it's a squad or a committee. I wouldn't refer to as a committee because this really requires full-time commitment. So yes, a squad would be a best naming for it. And this is just the beginnings, as I've mentioned. And once we sort of flash out like the details of the scopes and the compensation, we're definitely going to post a proposal for the community to vote. See document public? Yes, I will make it available.
What I wanted to say is that like working group is different from committee and committee is different from squad. That's why I brought this. This is the working group for financial planning. What I wanted to make clear is that what you're proposing is to create another structure.
For sure.
Okay. I wanted to clarify that.
No, for sure. You're right on that.
Okay. What I wanted also to point here is that first of all, that it might be a good idea to open the mic for the rest of the community if anyone wants to join and ask questions to Ruka or Moss or Lorelike about the presentation or make some comments apart from what we're discussing right now, always about financial planning. But if you want to join as a speakers, please raise your hands. And the other thing that I wanted to point here is that if we are moving this way, somehow, Lester, I'm going to invite you. Let me close my thoughts and I'll invite you. If you want to move forward this way, we'll probably need to go through several governance processes for creating a new committee or squad or whatever. So it might be a good idea to start more from the basics about what do we want to do with financial planning, considering everything that they just presented, but let's go more to the basics and let's discuss about the basics. I'll invite you now, Lastrom. you should be able to talk. If you are talking, I can hear you. Let me try to mute you and unmute you. Okay, I invite him again. Can you speak now? Don't know what's happening because you're unmuted, but I'm not hearing anything. The rest can hear, or is it me?
I don't hear.
Okay. Maybe try to restart the Discord. Yeah, it happens sometimes with this stage feature. But in the meanwhile, if anyone else wants to comment on the presentation or share some thoughts about the discussions.
I saw Morph has question in chat.
Great.
Yeah.
I think we can hear you now, Lastrom.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm in the car, and I guess Discord Mobile is having some issues. But thank you for having me up. I'm honored to be a part of the financial planning, and I've joined late in terms of where this has gone as a group. So I might be way out of line here and asking just a simple question, and I've been asking it more relatively lately. Anybody that doesn't know, I've been in the ecosystem since 2018, before the DAO existed, before Decentraland was public, building in the space. So I think I have a good head on my shoulders about the original intent and direction of the platform from the foundation, but also the DAO. So my one question is, have we overlooked the glaring question that the community has decided to make the DAO in its current mandate sustainable beyond its current mandate?
Well, that's important because what I mentioned a couple of minutes ago is that we need to get back and discuss that basics, right? And sustainability is a really important thing right now. Is something that the community has been discussing these last couple of months, and financial planning was created because of that. So
sure, I guess my point is, do we all agree that the original mandate was...
That was I was going to do. I think we first need to agree of if we need the financial planning, the sustainability, or if we're going to move another way. That's why the financial planning working group was created, and I'm glad that you brought this here. Because
it's kind of like the cart before the horse, we're talking about financial planning and sustainability and bringing an outside organization which has experience in treasury management and protocols. But we're doing that before we even talk about the requirement for that. And that's my point, is we're talking about all financial sustainability and financial planning and reducing and moving funds around. But if that wasn't the original intent of the mandate, then what are we doing? We're kind of wasting time where we could spend our efforts and money putting towards concepts and platform improvements and things that actually make the platform sustainable. Not the mandate sustainable, the platform sustainable. So I joined late, so I just wanted to know if that conversation has been had prior to all of this financial planning, because to me, that doesn't even make sense. If we wouldn't need financial planning after 10 years if we agree that the mandate was to not be sustainable.
I mean, I think, sustainability is not just about extending past that. It's about reaching those goals now, right? How are we going to be able to update the platform if we're just spending money unsustainably? We need to have this money actually go to projects that are going to make the platform better, and we need the mana to not just be constantly sell pressure, because it reduces the amount of treasury we actually have, right? So sustainability is also about making that vesting period, while we have it, last longer and be more effective. But I mean, this doesn't necessarily have to be for every dollar we spend, we need $1 coming in. It can just be hey, look, we're way too unsustainable right now. We just need to shift a little bit more towards sustainability. I think is kind of like at least where we should be starting, right? Because right now, I mean, we're burning a huge amount of money, and it's not getting us those things that you're asking for. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, that what Morph just pointed is where the discussions were right now. Okay, so we were discussing about not maybe the DAO surviving the more than the 10 years, but making it sustainable for the current context with the current state of the market, with the current state of the mana price. So that's where the discussions were going right now. But again, it's really it's appreciated that you brought that like core idea of where do we want to go and why do we want to go there. And what Morph pointed right now is what we were discussing in the working group about like making it sustainable for the current context, not about like the mid and the long term, but not about like going more. Sorry.
What's the current context then? Morph and I are great digital friends, and we have a lot of respect for each other. So we can definitely respectfully disagree at times and agree on times. But what is, in his word, unsustainable? I mean, there has to be a benchmark that says this is or is not sustainable, right? So is that benchmark reaching 10 years, or is it saying, guys, we will not have enough money in what time period? Is that 1 more year? If we are on the current context that we're talking about, does that mean that the DAO does not have millions of dollars beyond what date? Like, is there a retrospect that says the current project has zero funds in 2025? Is there any of that context?
I don't think we.
No, there isn't. So we're talking about sustainability and unsustainability based on this 10-year mandate, right? And we're trying to extend beyond that. And that's my point: is there's no talk about, and unfortunately with our DAO, we don't have infiltration or integration, as a better word, to our foundation, right? Our DAO does not dictate platform features, which is, in my opinion, as a developer, very poorly set up. Yes, we have mana contracts and ownerships of the token and the land and the assets, but we have zero influence in the platform. I know for a fact, because I know what's going to happen in February 2024, because the foundation told me. I, as a community member, did not ask for this. And I'm sure as many others did not ask for it. So my point of sustainability is there's no accountability between the foundation and what the DAO, the community want out of a platform to be sustainable. So I guess I'll wrap up with saying, like, what's the unsustainability? What's the benchmark? My question is, what is the benchmark for current sustainability or unsustainability?
Yeah, I think we can have that conversation. It's a good conversation to have. I mean, I think, again, respectfully, I see the DAO as something that has to last like for the life of the product, right? Like the foundation intends to wind down. It intends to like end that vesting contract. And if the DAO isn't still going, I mean, who's merging PRs? Who's like doing all this kind of like keeping the lights on business, right? I mean, I think just for that reason, we want to see some kind of sustainability indefinitely, even if that just means like, hey, we make $2,000 a month from wearables, and we still need multi-signers to distribute that to pull request merges. You know, even if it's just something really small and simple, I think we have to have that, or we get like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, when the BIFI contract runs out. That's it. You know, so I think we need some form of sustainability. It doesn't have to be large. It just needs to keep the lights on. But I think when we're talking about sustainability here, it's like very much, hey, we're leaking a huge amount of money. We're not seeing a huge amount of value return from it. Is there more like professional financial oversight that we can add here that's going to help us reduce that leak for like things that aren't actually benefiting us that much? And so I think what I really liked about Kapaki, and I got to be honest, I came in pretty negative because I don't really like centralization, especially, you know, at the financial level. I find it quite concerning. But I really liked what they had to say about the way that it was managed, about the fact that they would be helping with diversification so that we're not just constantly selling mana on the open market in a very unstrategic way, which causes, you know, more downward price pressure. It makes our treasury less valuable as opposed to more valuable. You know, those are all things that we can put under the umbrella of sustainability but we don't necessarily have a conversation like, oh, okay, like we need to drag this 10-year vesting contract out to 25 years. I don't think it has to be like, oh, we need to survive.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, Morph. I love that. I don't know if that's like, yeah, but I think that's more about like the token sustainability and price sustainability, you know, because what I see in the proposals of the DAO, it's reducing funds, it's changing this thing, which again, it's not limiting the out, and so that goes under the sustain. You know,
am I the only one that's not hearing?
Semi-relevant conversation.
Yeah, you're cutting out a little bit, but I think that's.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Oh yeah, no, Morph. What I was saying is like, just long story short, like I agree with you completely, but I don't agree that is the sustainability conversation that's happening in the DAO. You know, I think that the token and the mana price and that is a financial conversation that is above my head, and somebody like Comparkey can come in and help with that. But also, as I just brought up, and you brought up too, if the DAO is going to take over the platform after the foundation winds down, I mean, there is no technical connection between the DAO and the foundation now. And so we're trying to figure out like the DAO's treasury and what to do with it. But what happens when the foundation goes away? What are we going to do? I mean, we don't even know as a DAO, as a community, what features are being worked on. Like I said, we don't even know. As a grantee, I had to meet with the foundation on Friday of last week to determine the feasibility of our latest grant. I met with foundation engineers. And through that conversation, I found out new feature sets coming from the foundation. I didn't find out as a DAO member. And so if we are going to be sustainable, as we're throwing that word around, shouldn't we have visibility into the platform feature sets? I mean, that is where I come in with the sustainability from a developer. And then I see things like reducing the creativity aspect of the DAO funds so that we can be sustainable. So we're talking a lot about different things. And I think clarity in the DAO really needs to be very, very specific about when we talk about sustainability, we're talking about token and mana price so we can support the platform potentially beyond 10 years, but not use the 10-year funds to make it sustainable beyond that, but use the 10-year funds to build something that can make it self-sustainable.
Can I jump in really quickly? Les, nice to meet you. I think you're totally right. I think we're discussing different topics here. One, so I totally agree with you that there's a total disconnection between the foundation and the DAO, and the processes are just not there, and all the technical heavy lifting is still being performed by the foundation, and there's very little oversight of how this whole transfer of responsibilities is going to play out in the future. What we've discussing here is how can we create a framework, a sort of a financial platform that stops the bleeding and creates the right incentives, i.e., show itself to the market as a sustainable, long-term and solid sort of DAO that the developers can start jumping in to contribute. Because as Morph as mentioned before, right now, the token and the economics are just not there to offer the confidence and the trust for external service providers and contributors to jump in. So I totally agree with you. I just think that we're talking about two different topics, and I would definitely start by revising sort of the financial infrastructure first to create the right environment to later on attract developers in the whole ecosystem.
Thanks a lot, Luca. Aloy, do you want to share something?
Yeah, hey, can you hear me okay?
Yep, perfect.
Fantastic. Yeah, I just wanted to ask, I was looking at the document, Treasury Management, and the little diagram you have going on. By the way, it's a pleasure to meet you guys. I wanted to ask, in regards to the diagram, it says vault owner, and I'm assuming that the original vault owner is obviously the current, DAO Treasury contract. When it says self-custody, and in that bracket it says create and own vault, deposit funds, redeem funds, is that a separate vault on top of the existing vault in which you as a centralized organization make specific decisions on funds that you have access to, or would you have access to the entire treasury of the DAO, if that makes sense?
I guess that's a question for me. And nice to meet you, by the way. So the vault can be owned by either a multisig or by a governor contract, or whichever setup is more appropriate in this case. Then that address that can determine the specific configuration of the vault. And one of the specific policies, that is the delegation of the operation within the vault to an address. So in this case, carpet keys or avant-gardes. So the service provider will have the ability to operate within the vault and determine strategies and execute them. Obviously, they will be pre-agreed strategies with the DAO that we presented and pre-approved. And you have many examples of that, of Carpet Key doing that for ENS and for other DAOs as well, and ourselves too. I mean, we present strategies, we get them approved by the DAO, and then we implement them on chain. And assets would be moved from the DAO's address to the vault. And when you move assets into the vault, the smart contract mints tokens, which are vault shares. ERC20 tokens are vault shares that represent the ownership on the underlying assets, because only through those tokens can one redeem the assets. So the delegated manager would only be able to operate according to a set of guardrails that are preset, and the prerogative for redemption is only for the DAO, so for the vault owner. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Cheers. And then a follow-up question. Oh, you kind of answered it actually. Never mind. No, thank you very much. Yeah, cheers.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks, Mallory, sorry, go ahead.
Just I guess it's worth mentioning some of the things that you could set as policies on an Enzyme Vault. You could set things like, hey, the manager can only touch these two assets, like Mana and Ethereum, for example. You can say it can only touch this protocol, like Uniswap or Curve or whatever. I mean, we have 20 plus integrations, so then it can be restricted to certain protocols. You can do things like maximum slippage tolerance. You say so that cannot be bad trades. Because sometimes managers can execute trade with high slippage. Sometimes unintentionally, sometimes even maliciously. So in this case, if you implement a slippage tolerance, which is maximum 5% or maximum 10%, then there will be no such case. So these are example of policies that can be configured and that can be controlled by the DAO by owning the vault.
Thanks a lot, Mas, for answering the Malloy's question. And anyone else that wants to jump here to ask questions or to make some comments or share some thoughts? By now, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, friend. There is from audience Trekoza. Yeah, she raised hand some time ago.
Sorry, couldn't hear you well.
Yeah. From audience, Trekoza raised hands. A girl, maybe you can give a word to her.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Before giving the word to Chris and to Kosa, I wanted to make a quick recap of what we've been discussing so far. And the discussions have been around what do we want to do with financials, okay? The concept of financial planning. We have we have Enzyme, MOS, Bruca, so they can help us to manage in a better way the treasury that we have right now. But the questions, getting back to basics, are: do we want to have a more ordered way to manage the funds for these 10 years, or do we want to survive those 10 years? And I'm going to take some comments that I read from the chat, and it's about replacing the foundation, about surviving, about discussions that we've been also having in the strategic planning working group about taking ownership, more ownership on the platform development. So the discussions here, again, from basics are: do we want to go through these 10 years in a more ordered way to stop the draining or whatever you think it's happening with the treasury right now, or do we want to survive those 10 years? And for that we need not only a plan of what are we doing with the treasury, but what are we going to do with the treasury once we survive those 10 years. And that's our discussions that we need to have also about the platform, about the grants program, and everything around it. So I wanted just to make a quick recap of those basics that we were discussing a couple of minutes ago, and remind you all that financial planning and the concept of treasury management came a couple of months ago from some pre-proposal polls that Lorelai, Morph, and other community members created. And there was this need of having those discussions. And again, those discussions are around deciding of what are we going to do. Are we surviving these 10 years? Or are we going to, or are we considering the DAO as a replacement for the foundation someday? And for that, we will need for sure to plan on our treasury. So with that said, with that quick recap, I'll open the mic for Chris that wants to share some thoughts.
Hi, Fede. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. I guess thank you to everybody on this panel right now. And thank you to the audience that's being here as well. I'm also kind of on the fence about this as well. I've been seeing and hearing what Lastrom has been speaking about. And I think there's a lot of merit to what he's saying. If we're asking for sustainability, like what is the benchmark? Like what are we basing this off of? Like, are there numbers, or are we just saying just lower expenses, just to lower expenses, right? I think the reason behind the DAO was to invest in grantees, right? For grantees to create value. But if we're saying we want to reduce, I guess investing in grantees or investing in projects, then what's next? Like what's really the main purpose of the DAO? Of course, there's a lot of purposes, but like, what is the main core purpose of the DAO? And I think it's for us to, kind of invest in projects or in grantees projects. So I'm really on the fence about this. I do hear and I do understand that there needs to be sustainability. We can't just keep investing. But at the same time, like, where are the numbers, or what's the benchmark to kind of, support the argument? I'm not seeing that right now. So that's where I get on the fence about. So that's just my 2 cents on this matter.
I think the benchmark is just spending 6 figures on, grantees that can only generate 20 to 30 active users, and the retention is garbage. That's like a really unsustainable, right? So we need less of that and more accountability for when people take lots of money and don't provide us anything in return. Grantees aren't like naturally good. Most of them are just stealing from us.
Yeah, and more. I think last room he spoke about this before. That's different. That's like, and that's just basically picking the right projects, like choosing how we vote. Like maybe I was one of So I think that's a whole.
We can't expect the general audience to pick good projects all the time, right? So we need more ways to have accountability, and we need a centralized force of some kind that can hold people accountable. Because it's not possible for the DAO to hold people accountable, because we have to vote props, which take 3 weeks to pass, and then it's too late.
Yeah, so more what I think, and it's just my opinion, Morph, but what I think is maybe what we can do is, for example, maybe we can have some criterias, or we can have some parameters about what we as a DAO consider to be a good project to invest in for when people submit proposals. I'm just giving an example. I know some people, there been some, unconventional, like you must have a name, you must been inside, Decentraland for a certain amount of time. Maybe we need to set up certain parameters as well to say, listen, if you want to apply for a grant in Decentraland DAO, this is what we hope for you to hit, like these benchmarks before applying. I think that solves that will help us solve, people complaining and saying that this is a bad project, it's a rug pull, etc. But if we're saying that, oh no, we want to lower the grant program because there's bad projects, because the communities vote on bad projects, I think that's two different it's with two different logical standpoints. So I like I said, I do agree, I do understand, and I do feel we do need to be be very cautious about how we spend the funds, but I don't think reducing investments on grantees, platforms, in-world content might be the way, unless we have numbers to support it. But if we're basing our argument on their six-figure grants and they haven't been they're not doing what they said they were going to do, then that's a whole nother conversation we need to have. We need to set perimeters as far as what we feel these grants that are applying, they should at least, they should at least contain or be willing to produce.
I agree with you 100%. Yeah, I think we need
chime in there. Oh, sorry, go ahead, more.
I was just going to say, I think the reason that people want to reduce the grant sizes is because they're looking at the numbers, right? Like they're looking, like you say, the baseline right now of what we get user acquisition per dollar, and it doesn't look good. So we're kind of thinking, well, maybe we should just reduce the spending until, grants can prove that they can actually show success. Because we're not seeing that in the majority of grants. And the grants that we are seeing that do very well, a lot of them are being driven by the community for a very low cost, right? Like I think like the hands update is a really good example of something that was community driven, and they didn't ask for like a massive grant for that. The larger grants tend to be the ones that aren't doing so well. So I think that's where that push has come from. But like we said, this is all part of the same story. If we can get more accountability and if we can force grantees to actually hold up their end of the bargain, not preemptively, because I know that's like a very easy checklist to hit, like having a name or having certain things that you need ahead of time, but retroactively, how do we ensure that if we give you $100,000, how do we ensure that we're actually getting the value out of that? And if you fail, if you bring in 10 users for $100,000, how do we claw back some of that money or stop it from leaking safely in the first place?
I think that's the discussion we should be having. I don't think the discussion should be how do we reduce the the DAO expenditure. I think it should be, like you said, how do we hold the grantees more accountable? How do we set higher criteria? I think that's what we should be discussing. That's my opinion.
That's a good conversation, Chris, but this is financial planning. So some of that comes into here, but where it does come in is reducing that framework. And again, understanding the rationale for the reduction of a grant framework or a pause on grants or reallocating funds like treasury management. And it gets back to my original question. What was the mandate? Here's a bucket of money. Here's 10 years. Go build something sustainable. If you fail, you fail. And I'm just going to say right now, I am not afraid of failure. If we don't build something sustainable in 10 years, we have failed as a community. And that's okay. Life goes on. People will be dynamic and adapt. So my original question keeps coming back to like, what is that original mandate? Do we agree on that or disagree on that? And then from there, decide where do we want to be sustainable or not? Should we change the mandate or not? Which then gets into all of these other topics, one of which has yet to be addressed, which is a great topic to bring up in the financial planning. If we are going to be a DAO controlling the platform after 10 years, where is the strategic unit in terms of the DAO, the community devs, the community, and the foundation? Because I don't want to blow the cover on what the foundation's working on in February, but I will raise my hand digitally and say, I did not ask for this. And so we're all talking about sustainability, but for what product that we don't even have a say in?
Yeah, I think that's fair. We should get more transparency there, right, Lastrom? Like, I think we can definitely push that concept because I think it's needed. The DAO needs to know what's going on if we're going to be actually planning ahead multiple years. But I want to wrap this up so I'm respectful of the Kapaki guys that are here. But I just want to say, these proposals that we're putting forward are not like existing in a vacuum, right? So when we want to reduce the amount of money we're spending, that's a symptom of the fact that we're not spending money well. If we want to spend more on creators and we want to give out more money so that we can grow the platform, we need to have all these other things like working properly to be able to do that. And so I don't think anyone is voting to like cut funds indefinitely because they want the DAO to last twice as long and then fail. They're saying like, no, right now we're not doing a good job with these funds. They're not like getting us value in return. Let's slow down a bit. Let's like cut the cost a little until we can reevaluate that and actually have some sustainable planning that's going to make this money go further. And then we can lean in, double the spending again, et cetera, right? Like I don't think we're necessarily voting one way or the other forever, but we are looking at the current situation and trying to prevent the damage that's being done. And I think that's a huge part of what, again, like this kind of professional centralized force like Kapaki can really help us with, right? Is how do we increase accountability? How do we have some kind of centralized force that we can go through if we need to like have things managed and organized, right? And I think that's where this specific conversation can lean in and really help us there. Not saying those other things aren't an issue, and I'm totally down to work with you on those last term. Like let's sync offline and put something together to like make transparency better between the DAO and the foundation. But I just don't want us to think like, oh, the reason we're cutting creator funds is because we want creators to have less money. It's not. No one wants creators to have less money. We want creators to be able to build. We want them to have funding, but it's just that's not what's happening right now. And so we're trying to come up with ways to fix that. And yes, just having better grants pass is definitely like the number one easiest way to have that happen. But again, we're not seeing that. It's, you know, all the money is going out every month, and it's not always going to the best grants. Is why we're so concerned.
Yeah, no, let's not take away their thing, but like you just said, it's a symptom, right? So we're putting a Band-Aid on the symptom. We're not giving us the right medicine, which is the crux of accountability and how these grants get passed and voting and all of that. So that's a totally different topic. And by reducing grant funding, we are reducing the support for the community. Because again, what does the DAO do except support the community through grants? I would like to know where that money is spent to.
Les, can I chime in really quickly on this topic? I honestly don't think that by sustainability we mean completely reducing the expenses and shutting down the grants program. It's mostly about optimizing for short-term return on the grants that are being currently invested on, right? So, I mean, once the processes are there, and I tend to protect and believe on, you know, when you have the right incentive schemes and right accountability, things will start to show up more quickly. And this really means having people that are accountable for and responsible for making sure that the DAO's spendings are done responsibly. Then we can start thinking on, you know, ways in which to invest. And it's really difficult to me to foresee a business model without having top line accounted for, right? So we need to find revenue streams. We need to do financial planning. We need to start, you know, thinking long term on ways of which we should once, you know, first and foremost, really become, you know, conscious of the P&L, but mostly, you know, sort of foreseeing additional revenue models and ones that preferably are not correlated with the native token. That's just my personal opinion.
No, I know, but you know, when we talk about Kompartki and those guys, there's literally a proposal that says let's take less money from the community grants program and let's fund it to things like this. So let's put more money into thought, right?
You're not seeing that on our proposal for sure. What you're seeing is, yeah, exactly. So first and foremost, accounting, then do planning. But
we're all doing this for free right now is my point. And there are people on the DAO that are committee members and strategic units that have assistants that can be doing this without reducing funding from the community to increase funding for this type of thought. That's my point is, why can't we just do this? You know, maybe freeze the grants. Just don't even give any more grant money. My personal opinion is we don't need to take money away from something to fund future thought because we don't even know what or agree what that future thought is.
Sorry. Yeah, I wanted to pass it to you, Dogman. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Fez. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I'd say I'm kind of middle of the ground here. I don't, like, I agree that we need to come up with better systems for, like, what we agree a successful grant is and, like, what we think sustainability is, but like I kind of agree with Lastrom that I just, you know, I don't think pausing grants or freezing grant, anything like that is the answer. Reducing funding is the answer. I think we as a community have learned a lot, especially in the past 2 years. People are realizing that these massive budget for in-world events very rarely, if ever, pay off. So I don't personally, from my perspective, being in the DAO for so long, I have seen a lot of positive change. I see when people come and they ask for a $120,000 grant now, unless there's a few specific people who vote to pass that, generally the community is very aware of, what is this going to bring back? So I just wanted to step up and say, I personally don't see the merit in reducing funding for people who are building real stuff. I just think that we should direct that fund to, as other people have said in the past, to people who have a proven track record of success, who have made, successful steps to either producing revenue or onboarding or education, whatever their goal is. Then, we should reward those people. I also think that there's really very, very few reasons that we should be giving anyone $100,000 to produce anything in world. Like if it's a platform improvement, okay, maybe, but really, I don't think we should be giving anyone $100,000 to produce an in-world thing unless it's incredible. That being said, I don't think that we need a DAO structure that says we cannot do that. I don't think we need to put in place a rule that says we can't do this, because I think both community members and the DAO itself is getting more aware of what's successful and what has worked. So I personally am against putting set in stone rules, because we've seen how that works in the past, and it just does not facilitate growth in the DAO, in my opinion.
Very many interesting points. Yeah, maybe we can start this process of financial planning, treasury management without reducing the grants program. Thank you for all these strong opinions.
Let's start with that on this, Lord. If I may, and I want to remind the community that more investment is not necessarily correlated with economic or valuable output. Right. So it's not just, throwing gasoline into the fire if, the processes are not there to capitalize on such investments. Right. So first and foremost, it doesn't mean that we're optimizing for increasing investments. It's just that we're optimizing for extracting output out of those investments.
Yeah. And again, I think, the obvious counterpoint to that is that I'm not suggesting we just pour more money into whoever wants it. In the past, we have not had, in my opinion, successful investments. So I think we should define what we view as success and then give money to those projects who are pursuing that. Again, I'm totally not just saying, let's give more grants to people who haven't proven anything. I'm saying we should give grants to people who have extensive track records, who have done very, very solid things. And I think the people who have really done very solid things is very few and far between, especially in Decentraland. So I'm of course not saying we should give more grants than we're already giving. I'm just saying we shouldn't limit them with a set in stone rule, if that makes sense.
Thanks a lot for sharing your comments. I think we are pretty much on time. It has been an hour since we started. So, this was a really interesting meeting with a lot of insights. Thanks again, Mos and Ruka, for joining and for sharing your idea of what we should be doing at this time. Thanks, Lorelike, for putting everything together. And thanks to Lastrom, Morph, Dogman, Chris, and the rest of the community members that commented and share some thoughts here. So what I wanted to do is give some closure words to this meeting. We're probably having another financial planning meeting in a couple of weeks from now, probably in 2 or 3 weeks, maybe earlier. We'll discuss that with Lorelike later. But I'll suggest everyone to join the Discord channel, the financial planning Discord channel, and also to participate in our next strategic planning meeting, where we're going to talk about platform. And I would like to have everyone that's here right now discussing about the grants program, about funding platform projects and technical projects, to discuss how the DAO is going to take ownership in the long term, if we want to, of the platform. How can we build those bridges with the foundation to have more access to that information that we want to know about the platform, about the features, about the developments? So again, thanks everyone for joining this financial planning meeting. I think we have a lot to work with, not only the initial concepts of having an initial thought of what do we want to do. If we want to, sorry to repeat myself again, to survive these 10 years, or if we want to replace the foundation someday. And it's really interesting to define that in terms of midterm and long-term strategic planning. And it's also important for us to acknowledge that we're right now in a bear market. And that's why I think these discussions came in the first place, because mana price is getting lower, and we are spending a lot of money in grants that might not be performing the way that we want. But there are a lot of angles and perspectives that we will tackle from the financial planning perspective. And it's good to start thinking if we should start managing the treasury right now, to think in the midterm, in the long term, but also to try to manage it in a more ordered way right now. Again, to think in terms of training the treasurer, to think in terms of surviving, whatever. But it's really interesting and it's really important that we're having those discussions right now. So again, thanks everyone for joining this meeting. It was a really productive one. Thanks again to Moss, to Lorelai, to Ruka, and everyone that has joined. And well, we'll keep you posted about next meetings, and probably going to work on a recap for this meeting. Thanks a lot. I'm going to close this meeting, and I suggest you all to move to the financial planning Discord channel to continue the discussions. Thanks a lot, and thanks everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, bye.